I mean, these were the ultimate movers and shakers, were they not, of their day?
They were. I mean, Victoria and Albert, I mean, if they were alive today, they'd probably have a YouTube channel or something. They were incredibly, really sort of putting the monarchy out there and putting it on show.
Yeah, I mean, their influence is, in many ways, unsurmountable. But you're the experts. Let's start with you. Why do you think that they are so well remembered, and how much of what they did do we just take for granted and live amongst today, do you think?
Well, I think their influence on society was enormous. And as a couple, I think their influence was tremendous, because Victoria had the new idea of how to be a monarch. You know, to be a monarch who was very much more in touch with the people, I believe, than any monarch previously. She very much got off the high horse of the monarchy. She was interested in new media, like photography, that could bring her image and the image of her children in turn to the family. Albert was fascinated by new industry, new technology. I mean, they really were in touch, not in a kind of cliched way, in a real way, with what was changing the world, and they used it to make Britain, you know, absolutely state-of-the-art country.
They really did, didn't they? And in fact, so much of what we saw at play between the two of them in their marriage, we saw replicated many years later with Prince Philip and the late Queen Elizabeth in many respects. Both of them very young by the time they came to the throne, with a great eye for, as you say, modern media, you know. But let's start at the very beginning. I mean, Victoria, we know, came to be crowned at the age of 18. She married Albert just 3 years later. And it is regarded, in terms of our history books, as a genuine love match. How do we know that to be the case?
What we've got is her diaries from that really early period. I mean, the diaries last all the way through, but the ones right at the beginning haven't been censored by anybody. And so we really get insight into what she's like as a girl in her mid-teens. And Victoria is absolutely obsessed. She's got all these first cousins, male first cousins, scattered around Europe, and she's wondering who she'll marry. And they're brought over reluctantly, paraded before her, and she doesn't like any of them. And then Albert comes at one point, and she thinks, maybe he'll be all right.
And by the way, we should explain that it was quite normal back then to marry your cousin. Oh, yeah. Not so much these days.
Not so much these days. Not a good idea. But absolutely, for the royal family, really, really important, really, to keep it all in the family.
Keep the blood blue, right?
Keep the blood blue, absolutely. Don't want any commoners sneaking in. Then Albert comes back when he's much older, about 19, and she decides she really fancies him. She said, I beheld Albert, he was beautiful. And so he's had this extraordinary sort of 2-year kind of buffing up process going on in Germany. His uncle and his...
He's had a glow up.
He's had a glow up. His governor, Stockmar, they've pushed him up, they've taught him how to dance, which he couldn't do before.
Which was very important back then, right?
Well, so important to Victoria. For her, dancing was everything, and she was so disappointed.
But the circles that they mixed in as well, if he couldn't, you know.
You would just know her. She was so disappointed when she first met him because he didn't approve of dancing as a slightly priggish 16-year-old. So she said, send him away, dough him up, buff him up, give him some dancing lessons. He comes back, he's gorgeous.
And he was a good-looking guy in his day, wasn't he?
So nice-looking. Yeah. Lovely legs.
They were a very handsome couple, weren't they?
The idea that Victoria, you know, the sort of idea that's been imposed on her from later times, that she was always very buttoned up and
wearing black.
Yes, exactly. She was sensual. She was crazy about Albert. And she loved him, properly really loved him, and she fancied him. She wanted to make love to him. I mean, there's an amazing room.
They had 9 children, she really did.
Yeah, but there's this room at Osborne House where they, on the Isle of Wight, where they used to go and have their retreats, this sort of wonderful royal palace that they made. And there's a room in there where they used to do their royal duties together. They used to do the papers together.
That's not euphemism, that's work, right?
No, work. It was work. But on the wall of that room, she gave to him one of the sexiest paintings of the 19th century by Winterhalter, a painting of nothing but naked ladies disporting themselves. It's actually a story from Shakespeare or some romantic poem where there's all these ladies are spying on a beautiful young man or something. But anyway, anyway, but the bottom line is she wanted him not to just think about work when they were together. And she put this picture there basically to suggest the concept of going to the bedroom as soon as possible. I mean, she was nuts about him.
And
Can I just say, it did work because Albert wrote home to his brother saying, she's got a lovely bosom.
But she also had her own quite risque for the time portrait painted, another Winterhalter, which is, you've probably seen it. I mean, it shows Victoria with her hair kind of down and, you know, quite a low-cut dress, and that was intended to be for Albert's eyes only.
So, I mean, they really were bedazzled by one another. But the British public were not so sure on him, were they? They thought he was a little bit low-ranking for our Queen in terms of his standing in aristocratic circles. Is that right?
Well, it's always going to be difficult because she's Queen of England. She can't marry another monarch, obviously, because then she'd have to go to Germany or Italy or so. So it's always going to be a second son or somebody who's not very important. So that inequality is always going to be built into it. I think the unfortunate thing is that the bit of Germany that Albert comes from, Coburg, is particularly undistinguished. It's not got a lot going for it. It had also been overtaken by Napoleon.
Yeah.
So it really
He was from the wrong side of the tracks.
He really was.
But on the plus side, it meant that he had this fantastic liberal German education, unlike the education that anyone in this country was getting. And he was a properly enlightened human being. And he had all these fantastic ideas about culture and about incipient democracy. I mean, he was left-leaning insofar as someone from that class could be. And all of that liberal German education, which you know you see expressed in German culture of the 19th century, which is so rich and wonderful, that totally transformed Britain because he brought it here. He brought those ideals here. That's why we've got all our great museums that he helped to build. That's why we've got the South Kensington complex. So, you know, yeah, from the wrong side of the tracks in a sense, but, you know, and also he had something to prove. And what did he use to prove it? He used his education, he used his culture.
But they brought a sense of a working monarchy to the people. They went out and did the gripping and the grinning, and they did the walkabouts. They started charitable ventures. In fact, I sat down with the member of our current royal family, Her Royal Highness Princess Eugenie, for my podcast, and asked her about how her family, especially the women within the family, regard the young Queen and also their legacy. So this is what she had to say to me.
Queen Victoria in our family is regarded and upheld as one of the most incredible sort of role models because of what she did, like when she started at 18 and how she went through her entire life as Queen, and she lost her husband. And we know so much about her in our family because my mum writes books and loves Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. And she did a film about her as well. She was a remarkable, remarkable woman and a remarkable monarch, and in a time when, you know, the world was massively changing.
So they were in the midst of great change, and rather than be swept along by it or overwhelmed by it, they decided to jump up front and drive that change, didn't they?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's fair to say that this is the point where we get the royal family, and obviously we talk about the royal family all the time in Britain now, but really it's Victoria and Albert that create this concept. There's been a monarch before and a monarch's children, but often they're not very visible figures. The Hanoverian monarchs that come before Victoria were quite unpopular. George IV, her uncle, actually spent most of his reign hiding away at Windsor Castle. He sort of famously built a tunnel to his stables in Brighton.
So he didn't have to see anyone.
So he wouldn't have to see anyone.
I mean, that's rude, isn't it?
Absolutely. So
So this is not a scene you would have seen until the reign of Victoria and Albert. This is them visiting Brompton hospitals in 1854, and this is with soldiers who have been in action in the Crimean War. So this is at the time, a scene like this, we would not have expected that from our royals, and it's something that we come to see as a given these days. This is the template to which our working royals kind of adhere to, right?
Absolutely. You would not have expected the Hanoverian monarchs to be going around the hospitals. Victoria really tried to push herself out there. She was very interested in the Crimean War, which is, of course, the first big war of her reign. Really interested in the condition of the troops. She would go out and look at the troops. I mean, she would go and visit them in hospital, and she goes fairly regularly to go and do charitable visits. She brings her children along as well, and that's seen as really important because it shows the monarch really sort of being seen with their people and not just this distant and quite unpopular figure, which her uncles and her grandfather had been.
I mean, on this day here, this is the Albert Pitt Military Hospital. On this day, they met with 450 soldiers in one day. You know, that's quite remarkable for, you know, in terms of like rolling out a new way of doing things. That's pretty full on, isn't it?
It is, and it's also what's quite remarkable is that she does it because soldiers had never had a very good reputation. You know, they're seen as a bit rowdy. I mean, at one stage she notes when she's looking at the soldiers, she's quite pleased not to have seen one that was drunk. But they don't have a particularly good reputation. But she really also, by doing this work, changes the reputation of the lower ranks in the army as well. So I think it's quite a positive thing that she's doing, and really this is the point where we start to see the royal family really actively doing charitable work
and embracing their connections to the military. Let's talk about the introduction of the Victoria Cross, which wasn't actually her idea. That can be put at the doorstep of her husband.
That's right. It was actually Albert's idea, as so many good things were this part of the early part of the reign. It's something that's quite extraordinary. It's given to soldiers who have been especially brave when there was a really strong possibility that they would be obliterated. So it's something very personal. It's somebody stepping out and putting themselves in danger.
Extraordinary bravery.
Yeah.
And here, I mean, this is a portrait of her presenting.
Yeah.
I know we said earlier she wasn't on a high horse, but she literally she really is there. But these are men who have shown acts of extraordinary courage.
Bravery. Yeah, absolutely. And in a way, I mean, I know it sounds a strange thing to say, but the Crimean War did the monarchy quite a lot of good, actually, because it was the first big war. It was safely somewhere else. It wasn't as if we were actually having to defend ourselves against the Russians. And so it allowed, I think, Victoria and Albert to show, you know, that they've got muscle.
The cut of their jib.
Yeah, the cut of their jib. They may seem very sweet, they seem very lovely, they're very, you know, sexy and good at all sorts of things, but they've got muscle. They have a strong military kind of backbone. I think it's kind of the last piece.